So we're in chapter 6 of your culinary book, and this chapter has to do with the unique subject, etiquette and hospitality. And why do we need to have hospitality? And why do we need to have etiquette? Well, let's find out. It says good etiquette is evidenced by doing the correct thing at the correct time and showing good manners and consideration for others. If these manners are practically on a daily basis, you'll come by them naturally. So it's so important that we have etiquette so that we can show hospitality to others. So showing hospitality takes many forms. It can be as simply offering a cup of coffee to a friend, or entertaining house guests, or hosting a meal, or even hosting a party. So on special occasions, regardless, it requires entertainment, requires planning. So not only entertaining, we're not so entertaining, but we're getting to know people and we're getting to love on people. So it's pretty important that we plan all of this, and then we can plan ahead so we can relax and we can enjoy our guests instead of be all stressed out, which happens a lot of time. It says the goal of hospitality is not lavish food, not an immaculate house, or beautiful decorations. The goal of Christ-centered hospitality and entertaining is to invest in the lives of others, perhaps even winning the lost souls to Jesus. So how important. So hospitality becomes a very important thing in God's kingdom, and bringing loving on people to the point of showing Christ's love to bring them to the cross of the Lord Jesus Christ. So it goes on here, as you entertain and show hospitality, keep the proper perspective. Put people first. Being hospitable is an important way to show brotherly love and share Christ's love with others. 1 Peter says, use hospitality one to another without grudging. 1 Peter 4:9. So God wants us to be hospitable. So the next section has to do with introductions. And introductions are very important in getting to know someone. And to be kind and bringing somebody in hospitality, we need to know how to introduce people, right? So whether you are entertaining at home or any special event, social events, introduce friends and guests in a way that shows honor and consideration for each person. Okay, here's tips and techniques making polite introductions. So let's see what they say about introducing people. And now you're young people, and sometimes it's like it comes naturally, and sometimes it doesn't. In the days, young people don't like to introduce each other. So, but how important and how kind it is to do this. So it says, show honor by addressing or saying the name of the more honored person first. That's not always, when you say more honored, it'd be basically that guest. If you have an honored guest that's an honored, say it's their birthday or you're honoring them, then that would be your honored guest. And so, addressing or saying their name and first introducing. It says, say the woman's name first when introducing a man and a woman. You have a man and a woman, introduce the woman. Mrs. Smith, may I introduce you to Mr. Jones, my co-worker. Mr. Jones, this is Mrs. Smith, who has long been a friend of my family. When two people are of different ages, say the older person's name first. Mrs. Smith, this is Susan. She is in my class, Susan. So you usually, God would have to honor the elderly, honor those that are elders. That's just being kind and honorable to them. Say the more prominent person's name. If there's a doctor or such, maybe you'd want to say their name first. Immediately introduce each guest to a small group of people rather than waiting and introducing the entire group at once. So when a guest comes in with a small group, don't just let them sit there and they don't even know anybody. Introduce them. Actually, I always think, oh Lord, who should I introduce them to? And then God will say, oh yeah, they have something in common. And so you go over and introduce them. So as you make an introduction, share something about each person that may be a conversation starter. And I just asked the Lord for those conversation starters. If you are being introduced to someone, follow the polite response. Stand up when you're introduced, make eye contact, smile, and shake hands confidently. That's a great way. And then you can respond with, "It's very nice to meet you." And "It's very nice to meet you." Include the name. Try to remember their name. That's a really hard thing to do, especially for me. I always have to take their name and then relate their name to something so they can remember their name. So in a business setting, if you're in business, introductions are based on rank. That means client. Your client always ranks the highest. So if you have a client, you're always going to cater to that client first, right? That's business. That's in business. Okay, let's talk about table etiquette. So at the table, so when hosting a meal or attending a guest, follow certain rules of etiquette. For a guest, proper table etiquette begins before the meal. For one thing, if someone has invited you for dinner, be on time. Be on time for anything they invite you to. And do not arrive early though, because possibly you'll surprise that person, that host, getting things ready or scheduling the meal or such. So don't be too early and definitely don't be late. So come to the table well-groomed with neat and clean appearance. Don't just come in there like you just woke up from a long night sleep or something. But come there well-groomed. Once you're seated, seat comfortably, but without slouching. Don't slouch. Cross your feet at the ankles and rest your hands in your lap. That's when the meal's served. Don't put your feet up on the chair, or sit crossways or however. Sit decently. So, and once the food is served, watch for the hostess to signal when it's time to go and begin eating. So if there are many people and no hostess, you can begin eating when those around you have been served. I like to wait for prayer. And if they don't pray, I don't say, sometimes I'll say, "Hey, why don't we pray over our food?" But if I'm in somebody else and they're the host, I'll just say, either talk to the host about it, or I will say, quietly a prayer to myself. So as you eat, keep your elbows close to your side and do not place your elbows or arms on the table. So you don't just put your elbows on the table. Bring the food to your mouth rather than lowering your head to be close to your food. So, or bringing your plate up to your mouth, So basically, bring your food to your mouth, not your plate or your bowl, and don't bring your face right down into your food. Those are two not cool things to do. So napkins. Let's talk about napkins. Let's see here. Sorry, napkins. When the meal begins, the hostess should unfold her napkin and place it in her lap. That's what you do. And then a luncheon size napkin is fully unfolded. And if you have a big napkin, basically halfway unfold it. Don't unfold a huge napkin all over your whole lap, but halfway. The napkin should remain in your lap during a meal. And then you can use your napkin thoroughly. It says discreetly use your napkin throughout the meal to avoid leaving traces of food or grease on the beverage glasses. So use your napkin in the meal, of course. When leaving the table, place the loosely folded napkin neatly to the left of the place setting. When you leave the table, put it on the left. Remember, I said all of the liquids are on the right, and on the left are all those other things, other type of foods. Well, the napkin would always go on the left. So flatware, that's your silverware. Choosing which piece of flatware to use is not difficult if you follow this general principle. So you're sitting there and you're at this fancy meal and you have all of the silverware. Where do you begin? It says, use the flatware farthest from the plate first and work your way with each course. So if you're not sure, just follow the example of the hostess. So never place used flatware back on the tablecloth. That just is gonna, which that will make the tablecloth, all wrecked, right? Use flatware, never use flatware to gesture, talk with your spoon and fork. That would not be too cool. Or use your own flatware or silverware to take food from a serving dish. So a serving dish comes around and use your own fork. No, never do that. Never use your own fork, never talk with your flatware, and never put your flatware on the tablecloth. Those are 3 don'ts. So, knives. When using for cutting, the knife is held in a dominant hand with the handle pressed against the palm. That's kind of natural. Forefinger pointing down on the handle and the elbows close to the body. Yep. Never raise a knife more than 2 to 3 inches above the plate. So you raise your knife up. No, you don't need to do that. When you're cutting meat, cut 1 bite at a time. Don't cut, okay, here comes your food, and you cut all your food up like you're preparing it for to feed a child or something. Don't do that. Just cut 1 bite at a time, and resting your knife between bites. So you rest your knife and you eat it, and then you cut another piece. When resting the dinner knife after each bite, angle it across the top right. So here's the picture right here. American resting style right there, the top. See where the knife is rested at the top. That's how you would do that. So basically the handle. Let's see. On with the angle it across the right top of the plate with the handle extending down and toward the right. Anyway, so forks. Use the side of the fork to break apart separate food that does not need to be cut with a knife. So you can use a fork by cutting, right? When eating, hold the fork like a pencil with the tines, points of the fork pointed up, and avoid overloading your fork. Place only the amount of food on the fork which you can bite. Don't put a whole big gigantic and start nibbling off your fork. It's not the way to do it. When it's not in use, angle the fork in its resting position. The salad fork is used in the same manner, okay, with the tines up. If you need to cut salad, use the side of your fork or use a knife. When you have finished with the salad, put the fork in the 4 o'clock position on the salad plate. So here we go. Here's American side. Here it is. Here's where you put your knife up here and you put your fork like that when you're not using it. See how they put it? This is American style. You transfer the fork from your left hand to your right hand after cutting each bite. But now we also have the continental style. It's a different style of eating, and you'll know. Europeans eat that way. Australians eat that way, So you hold the fork in your left hand, not in your right hand, in your left hand, and you have the tines pointing down, like the fork looks like it's upside down. And so they look like they're eating with the upside down fork. And that's how they eat. And then they take their knife in the other hand and they cut, and they take the fork and they don't put it down between. They just take the fork and knife. That's the European style. And I used to think, oh man, that is really, an impolite way of eating. But that's the way they eat over there, and that's their style. It's called the continental style. And if you need to take a break from your flatware resting position, whether you're using American style or continental style, you will place the fork in the resting position by placing on the plate, pointing its handle towards the 4 o'clock position, and placing the knife across the top, parallel to the edge of the table with its blade pointing down. So when using continental style, angle the fork and knife toward each other in the middle of your plate. So there's 2 different kinds. So let's just look at these styles so I don't have to go over them again. It's hard for me to describe them. So first of all here, of course, you have right here. So right here you have the American style. So you're resting, you're gonna put your knife at the top because when you're eating, you change your hands, knife and fork. That's how American style is. And then you leave your fork there, and that's when you're resting between waiting for another serving or something. And when you're finished, you just put your knife and fork right here. So, okay, the continental style resting, see how their fork is upside down? That's how they eat, with their fork upside down. So they'll leave their fork on this side and their knife on this side when they're resting. And then when they're finished, they'll put their knife and their fork here and lay it right ways. And that's just telling everybody, I'm finished, you can take my plate. So if you're a waitress, you'll know these things too, because you'll think, oh, they're finished, because that's the way Europeans eat. You know, they eat a little bit different. And this is the way Americans. You'll know we're just resting if we put our knife here. But if we put our knife and fork here, you know we're finished. So I'm not going to go over all of this here. That's kind of the picture there. So let's go on to the next page. It's all described there. So spoons. So spoons. Spoon away from yourself. When you're spooning things up, spoon away from yourself and take only as much food on the spoon as you can put in your mouth at one time. So don't put a huge, gigantic spoonful of stuff. Eat from the side of the spoon. When you're eating, eat from the side of the spoon, not from the, not from the top of the spoon. It looks like you're feeding a baby from the top of the spoon, right? Eat from the side of the spoon. When put sugar in a beverage such as tea or coffee, use the spoon in the sugar bowl to scoop sugar into your cup. Do not allow the sugar spoon to become wet, of course, because then you're going to put it back and somebody else is going to want to use it and it's going to look gross because it's wet and they won't want to use the sugar bowl. So, do not stir with the sugar spoon in the sugar bowl, right? Use a soup spoon or play spoon, those are bigger spoons, when soup is being served. Tip the spoon sideways into the soup bowl and ladle away from yourself. You always ladle, if you're dishing things up, ladle away from yourself. And I never knew that, but that's polite. But, turn the ladle away from yourself and then bring it in, like a circle. Pull away from yourself and bring it in. When you're finished, place the soup spoon to the top of the right side of your soup bowl and on the liner plate, put it on the liner plate. If there's no liner plate, leave the spoon in the bowl, but it's good to have liner plates, I know that. So that's a spoon. So let's go on with finger foods here. What kind of etiquette do we have with finger foods? Well, finger foods are foods that do not leave the fingers sticky or greasy, like carrot sticks, crackers, cookies. Those are finger foods. And they're often on a tray there, and you pick them off the tray and you can eat with your fingers. When these types of foods are accompanied by dip, it is not appropriate to double dip, right? To partially eat some food, then dip it back in. Don't double dip. Fried chicken is considered a finger food at a picnic. So you can eat fried chicken with your fingers if you're at a picnic or so. And it says a picnic or casual meal if you're eating, if the hostess has more formal meal or suggests using with your fingers. Basically saying, if the hostess says, you can eat with your fingers because we don't have any utensils or something, then you can eat with your fingers. Do as the hostess says, right? So let's go on a little bit about table manners, showing consideration. Regardless of the setting, using good table manners shows consideration for others. And a lot of times we have to learn these table manners, and we should be learning them when we're children. It says, start by eating very slowly, chewing your food very quietly with your mouth closed. Don't chew with your mouth open. Avoid taking very large bites and talking and drinking food in your mouth at the same time. Don't talk with food in your mouth, as in your mom told you that. Practice not eating too quickly or too slowly, but just keep in pace with the other diners. Sometimes I eat too slow, so try to keep in pace. When participating in conversation during a meal, when you're talking, speak politely with others and do not discuss sensitive topics or topics unsuitable during the meal. Okay, I'm going to talk about, the grossness when I was, at the hospital today and they were putting in an IV or something that's going to make everybody sick. Don't do that. Bread etiquette. When bread is served, you may completely butter hot toast or hot rolls. Otherwise, it is most appropriate to eat bread by breaking off one little piece of bread at a time. I didn't know you can do that. So you can take your bread and you can just break off a piece. You can butter it as you see, or you can eat it. buttering that piece, each piece, and eating it before breaking off the next piece. You can take one piece and butter it, and the next piece and butter it. I usually get a lot of butter that way, but it's very good usually. I love bread, of course. The consideration for other diners. Be aware that the things you do may be unappetizing to those around you. So keeping foods separate on your plate. So you don't get your whole plate and then you say, oh, I'm just going to mix everything together in a big bunch. I'm going to take my potatoes and everything and mix them with my gravy, but I'm going to also mix them with my meat and my sweet potatoes. And you have this big mixing bunch of stuff on your food. And everybody's looking like, oh, that's pretty gross. Don't do that. Be sure your hands are not dirty or greasy when you're passing the salt and pepper. That's funny. Yes, you don't want to have greasy, ugly hands. So wash your hands before you come and eat. Pass the salt and pepper together. Never use toothpicks, or I've seen people using dental floss at the table. You don't want to do this. Don't get out your toothpicks and picking your teeth in front of people. That's going to gross some people out. So, respect for the host. Show consideration for those who have prepared the food. So instead of refusing the food and say, I don't like that, don't do that. Go ahead and take them. If they're going to give you the food, take it. It's offered to you. Taste and eat what you can. Remember, the hostess has worked very, very hard. So don't insult the person who prepared your food. So, and also, if you can't eat it, unless you can't eat it, and you say, well, I have an allergy. If you have an allergy or something, you can say, oh, I have an allergy with this. It doesn't agree with me, and that's okay. So, let's go on here. So, do not salt your food. Oh, it says, by asking for extra condiments to go with a well-prepared steak or gourmet meal is not a good thing. So, like you have a great steak and you say, can I have some ketchup for this steak? They might look at you like, oh no, and it's a beautiful steak, so that's not all very good sometimes if you want to make an impression on your hostess. And do not take a bunch of salt and pour it on everything before you taste it. Remember to say please and thank you when offered or given food, and say excuse me when you're leaving the table. Those are just common courtesy. And unless it's emergency, don't leave the table before the end of the meal. If you need to leave for some reason, you'd say, may I be excused or such. But don't just say, okay, I'm done, and get up the table and you're gone. Not a good thing. Unfortunately, awkward situations sometimes happen, and you may have spilled something or dropped something. Discreetly apologize and help clean up, and those kind of things happen. So, and if you have to cough or sneeze or say excuse me and you leave the table if you have a coughing spell or a sneezing spell or have to remove a piece of food, or something like that, that may happen, and you can say excuse me for those things. So, what if you have something inedible in your mouth? You have a bone in your mouth. How do you get it out? Or you ate something and you're like, oh, I can't eat this. So you're going to take your napkin and you're either going to discreetly excuse yourself or, remove that item the same way that you put it in your mouth with your thumb and third finger and put it in a napkin, or put your napkin up to your mouth so you can take it out, right? Very easy. So, well, let's go on we're already on section 4, so we're really getting through this. Restaurant etiquette. So let's go through restaurant etiquette. So of course, Ellie, you probably know about restaurant etiquette, so I don't have to, but so it says, at any restaurant, staff members do many things to ensure that guests have an enjoyable experience. So guests should show their respect towards those who are working at the restaurant and toward the other guests with proper etiquette. It's really terrible when you are talking down to a waitress or someone that's bussing dishes. That really makes me sick. I hope that no one would do that. You never do that, You always be kind to them. Be sure to abide by the restaurant's dress code, say, well, I'm going to dress the way I want. But nowadays, restaurants don't have very many dress codes. Let's just say that. But if they do, you want to abide by it. Do not expect the restaurant to make an exception for you. As guests enter, the lady should enter the dining room first, and she should be seated by that host. Let's go on here. A host or hostess, I should say, avoid placing any personal items on the table. So that means if you're carrying a purse or a backpack or something, don't just stick it on the table. Either put it in your lap or put it on the floor near your feet, but don't put it somewhere where the waitress or the hostess or such is going to come over and trip over it. You want to make sure you put it neatly under your chair. When you're shown to the table, you may request to move to a different table before you're seating. Don't go sit at a table, then say, well, I want to move to another table. Ask them first, because of course they have to reset the table and everything. So, if you plan to split a dish with someone, ask for 2 plates, and then you can split it in that way. It's improper to just eat from somebody else's plate. Take your fork and stick on somebody else's plate and start eating. I've done that with Papu, but I know it's very impolite when people are around to do that. So don't eat off other people's plates. So it also says, okay, if you do split a meal, you might get a fee sometimes for them to split it. I love the way they split it a lot of times when you do split meals. It's good to split meals because you don't want to have to eat so much, Some etiquette principles are applied differently in a restaurant setting. In a noisy restaurant, it's acceptable to lean forward with your forearms on the table because you have to be able to hear other people talk. So you can put your arms on the table and lean forward. And it says, if it's necessary to leave the table, place your flatware in the resting position and lay your napkin to the left. And these actions will say that you're finished so they could come and bust your dishes, right? When the bill is brought to the table, they usually bring it to the one that's hosting the meal. If they're going to split the bill, you should tell them before time. So you can say, we are all splitting this bill, and so they'll know to put separate checks, so not the last minute separate check thing. The tip, you should usually give a tip that's for good service is 15% is appropriate and 20% is for great service. So if you have a large group, you will probably automatically be charged for 18 or 20% for your large group. If you have a big group, just know that they're going to charge you that anyway. So cell phones. So when you're at the dinner table, it's good to put your cell phone on silent, or your electric devices, put them to the side. It's not just good to sit there and just be on your cell phone the whole time and not being a good conversationalist, not talking to people. I know a lot of teenagers do that, but it's pretty rude. You come together, you want to be able to be hospitable, be kind to each other, not just playing on your cell phone or, texting on your cell phone. So, but if you do get a call that's important, you would just say, excuse me, I have to take this call. It's an important call, and leave the table and go. Don't talk on the phone at the table in a restaurant. Not a good thing to do. Just not. So we'll get into the party planning, but I want to go back to this last, I like this one section here. Biblical hospitality. So is hospitality in the Bible? I would say it is. So, and I love the examples given. It says, being hospitable is an important way to show brotherly love and share Christ's love with others. And the Bible offers many examples of Christians who showed hospitality. In Genesis 18, we have Abraham and Sarah demonstrating hospitality to people. They invited these people in and, fed them, were very hospitable. And they found out later that they were angels. That's in the Bible. So, in fact, the Bible says in 1 Peter, it says, use hospitality to one another without grudging. But it also says, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware. So Abraham and Sarah entertaining angels. So you might be entertaining angels. Never know. We've been hospitable to a lot of people, invited a lot of church people in. And later on, I felt like they are like angels to me. So And Jesus also emphasizes the need to show hospitality to strangers in a parable about the Good Samaritan. And that's in Luke 10:29 through 37. And this tells a story of a man who had been robbed and beaten and left on the side of the road. And people just walked by and just left him there. And then a Samaritan man, Samaritans were considered of low class, right? Stopped. And then he ensured that the injured man was fed and taken care and housed, and basically helped him with his wounds and everything, brought him to his house. And before leaving, he promised to pay money for all of his expenses. So this Samaritan's hospitable behavior towards stranger illustrates that everyone should show kindness and hospitality. So he went the distance to help this man on the side of the road and showing his hospitality. Another example is the Shunammite woman, and that's in 2 Kings. And it's where whenever Elisha would go by, she and her husband would set up a place for Elisha to spend the night at their house. And so she was very hospitable, and she was basically helping a prophet on the way. Lydia in the New Testament met Paul near a river after she was baptized. She constrained or compelled him and those with him to come to her house and to stay at her house. She was known for hospitality. Aquila and Priscilla also invited Paul to stay at their house. And they're mentioned another time in the New Testament for using their home for the church to meet even in their home. So we see these passages that tell us, again, 1 Peter says, use hospitality one to another without grudging. Being hospitable toward others should be the habit that is done joyfully. Hebrews 13:2 basically says that be aware you might be entertaining angels. So be aware, be hospitable, be kind, because you might be entertaining angels. Amen.